So if you get asked a question about communism, post-war America, so in the 1950s, you're really talking about Senator McCarthy. Now we did a lot of this on it in year 10, so you should remember some of this, but this is just to go over what was happening. So in terms of the question, it would come at it in terms of maybe the international situation with communism and then the situation with communism inside of America. So I'm going to split this podcast into two. So let's look first of all at what was happening internationally. After the Second World War, the Russians started to liberate lots of countries in the east of Europe. So they started to free these countries from Nazi rule, which sounds amazing, like a really good thing. The problem was these countries were fairly weak, so it was easy for the Russians to put in a communist government in these countries. So a couple of examples where this happened was Poland and East Germany, because Germany was split into East and West. And as well, East Berlin, so the capital of Germany was split into two as well. So those places became communist straight after the Second World War. Now, to emerge from the Second World War, there was two major superpowers. One of them was Russia, or the USSR, and the other one was America. And the problem was they were vying for power in this post-war period. So America were really, really worried that loads of countries in Europe would now fall to communism, and it did look a real possibility. So they were absolutely desperate to stop communism from spreading. And what this is called by the Americans is the theory of containment. They were trying to contain communism, so to stop it from moving any further across Europe and possibly reaching them. And the reason why they were worried about this is they came up with a phrase called the domino theory. So they thought, like a pack of dominoes, once one country falls to communism, the next one will, the next one will, the next one will, the next one will, and so on. So they were really concerned that that is what might possibly happen. So what started to happen to worry them even more internationally though, was that in 1949, China fell to communism. Now this was really, really scary for America, because in terms of the size of China and how rich and powerful it was, this was something that made it a realistic threat that maybe, just maybe, America could fall to communism as well. So that really started to scare them. And in 1950, the Americans got involved in the Korean War to stop communism spreading over there. So every time it looked like something was going to happen in terms of communism, the Americans tried to step in to stop it going any further. And you'll definitely have heard of this because we've talked about it a few times. In the 1960s, the Vietnam War, with the involvement of the Americans, came because they didn't want Vietnam turning totally communist. So they get involved in that, and in the end they lose that war, and it's a total disaster for America. So at any opportunity they have to try and stop the spread of communism, they're utterly desperate to do that. And straight after the war, the Second World War, President Truman and Stalin, who was in charge of the USSR, did not get on at all. They really didn't trust each other. So that was making the relations even worse. The tensions between them in the Cold War were immense. And the reason it's called the Cold War is there was no actual fighting. It was just a war of words and propaganda between these two superpowers. But at any point, something could have triggered off a war, so they always had to be very careful in terms of what they were doing. But the situation internationally really did scare the Americans, because they felt that communism at some point could come over and it could just ruin their democracy and they could be taken over by a communist regime. The situation inside America. So this is the other part of this podcast. So you'd have to talk about the international situation, but the reason why I started this off saying it was Mccarthyism is because inside of America, at this time, straight after the Second World War in the 1950s, there was a man called Senator McCarthy. Now, he was a powerful politician who spread the fear of the Red Scare. And it's called the Red Scare because the communist flag is red. And he even used the phrase, "Reds under their beds." I know it sounds ridiculous, but he actually said to them, it's too late to stop communism, they're already under your beds. And some people were so scared of this, They were checking under the beds because they actually literally believed that that was the case. The cinema didn't help either, because there was a few films done about the spread of communism, and it was almost like this big red blob spreading over America and it was going to engulf it. So people saw things like that as horror movies, and then they thought, oh, this is realistic, the communists are coming for us, they're going to take us over. And they'd always been scared of communism and communists, because if you remember the things from the 1920s, they didn't really like any immigrants coming in from Russia because they were worried that they might spread communism in America, and that was in the 1920s even. So how did he spread the fear? It's frightening how easy it was for him to spread the fear of communism, and these are a few things that he did. He put 10 Hollywood producers on trial in 1947, saying that they were communist sympathisers, and they actually got jailed for a year because they absolutely refused to say whether they were communist sympathisers or not, because they believed if they lived in a democracy, why should they even have to say whether they are or not? So some of those got put in jail. Another person that you've heard of, Charlie Chaplin. Poor Charlie Chaplin, who used to be a really famous slapstick comedian, he really got thrown out of America because people thought he might be a communist spy or communist sympathiser, and he had to leave America to go and get work because nobody would employ him. And when people start to hear somebody's name that they actually know, they start to believe it because they're like, oh, I know Charlie Chaplin, has he really done that? So that's the sort of thing that starts to happen. And as well, something else that was ridiculous is they started to just take everyday people off the streets and in workplaces that they thought might be communist spies or communist sympathisers. So teachers, for example, they'd been talking about communism or suspected that they could be a communist. They could get removed from the job and they could be put in prison and things as well. It was absolutely out of hand. And he was completely getting away with doing all of this because he spread the fear that was already there inside them because of the international situation. And the leader of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, he worked alongside Senator McCarthy and believed all this about, the spread of communism and communists being in America. So what he did was, J. Edgar Hoover put 1 million people under surveillance during the late 1940s and 50s. And this really was a big waste of time and money because they would go around following people thinking they were communist sympathisers or spies. And you could be arrested just by somebody saying, oh, I heard them talking about that the other day, so they were mentioning the Cold War, so obviously they must be a communist. So it was really, really frightening how easy it was to convince people that communism had already spread to America, it was already in the country. And someone J. Edgar Hoover actually put under surveillance was, yes, Martin Luther King, you better believe it. And we absolutely know that he was no communist sympathiser, but they were worried about him because anything that looked like it could overthrow the order, like what he was doing with the civil rights movement, they were suspicious of. So Senator McCarthy, for years, got away with saying all these things, but then he really pushed his luck because he said that 45 members of the American Armed Forces were communist sympathisers or spies. Now people started to question that. Because just think about it, why would you go and fight in the Korean War, risk your life in the Second World War, and then actually be a communist sympathiser? And people felt he'd gone too far. So what was set up was a subcommittee to look into all of the things that he'd been saying, and yeah, you're right, he got found out to be just a liar and a bully, and all these things that he said about people were completely unfounded allegations. So he fell from grace pretty quickly after that. But McCarthyism is now when somebody talks about things being over-exaggerated and things like that, they call that McCarthyism because that is exactly what he did with the situation inside of America and communism after the Second World War.